Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Dangerously Optimistic podcast. My name is Ayaan Moledina. I'm here with my co-host, Damaris Allen. We are excited to talk about more lessons in protecting public education from the South. Damaris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited because we have a special guest today.
Who is that?
All right, so this morning we are so excited to introduce to you Lissette Fernandez. She is a parent in Miami-Dade County, and she founded a group called Moms for Libros. And Lissette, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this work?
Sure. So it started in 2023 when the book banning issues came to Miami. We hadn't had seen any issues down here with Moms for Liberty or the book bans or anything like that. But in 2023, we made national news with Amanda Gorman's book being challenged in one of our public schools, and that's basically what lit a fire under my behind and told me, okay, it's time for me to start getting a little more active and try and help stop the what's going on.
And so you have public school students, right? So you're
I do.
so you're deeply impacted by all of these things that are happening. And this wasn't your everyday job, right? Like you're not to say you're just a mom, but like as someone who feels that too, like I was just a mom. Like I didn't have any experience in this. I had a different job completely, but I just cared about kids. And that's kind of where you are, right?
Exactly. At the time, I was a stay-at-home mom. Um, and that was basically my reason for starting was because, Moms for Liberty was targeting stay-at-home moms and the traditional, what we now call a trad wife. And that's basically what I was. I was a trad wife, stay-at-home mom. I took care of the kids. I cooked, I cleaned, I did, all the things. Um, and I did not believe the things that they believed. I didn't believe that we should limit our kids. And yes, I do have two kids in public schools. One of them is actually has an IEP, so it hits especially hard for somebody that has difficulties as is when there's issues going on with public schools. So yeah, that's kind of my story.
Which is great because I think so many people feel like, oh, these problems are so big. I'm just an average person. I don't know what to do. And you just started where you are. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us,
Yeah,
to be a little bit optimistic that because we can change things, even if there's small incremental changes, all of those things add up. So, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in Miami-Dade? And also, can you give us a little idea about because Miami-Dade is huge, right? And a lot of people
yeah.
don't realize how big a lot of Florida school districts are. So can you tell us a little bit about the school district and then what's happening?
Sure. So Miami-Dade is the third largest school district in the country. We have a ton of schools. What is recently happening, we have quite a few problems going on right now. One of them being that our enrollment numbers are down, which means schools are starting to close. In the last school board meeting, what was it, 2 weeks ago? The school board voted to close 9 schools, which is a big problem. And then on top of that, we have charters that have been encroaching into our public schools, meaning that they are strategically placing their charter schools next to our public schools in hopes of siphoning off the children from the public schools so that our enrollment numbers drop and then they grow a lot more. And then on top of everything else, we have Success Academy that is starting to locate elementary schools within high schools,
Wait,
which
so
is
you have
very interesting.
elementary schools that are going to go into high school?
K through 1, yes,
That sounds like an interesting combination.
and 5 public high schools, yes.
Wow. And so one of the things I
And
do want
why
to
did
say,
they do that?
yeah, go ahead.
So I was just asking, I was like, why did they do that?
That's a great question.
Oh, we don't know. Okay.
I mean, it's a new law that well, not new, but it's legislation that was maybe Damaris can talk
Yeah.
more on this. but it is legislation that was passed recently that would give them more of an in into being able to take public school space, basically take, because they're not leasing, they're not paying anything for the space that they're using. They're just coming in, taking an entire building, using public school resources, and just being in the school.
Yeah, so not this past legislative session, because not the laws that went into effect July 1st, but previous July 1st, Florida passed a law that allowed in the budget late in session, with no parental input, put in the budget that a small group a small group of charter schools considered schools of hope could be co-located in a underutilized public school. The specifics of that law were talked about in the State Board of Education meeting, but this was really driven by large donations, right? This wasn't something that parents wanted, that school districts wanted. In fact, it was one of those things that kind of united everybody against it, right? Like we had parents against it, students against it, school districts against it, school board members against it. Everyone was all in agreement this was a terrible idea. But you have some billionaires that are funding this, right, Lissette?
Ken Griffin in particular had donated, I think it's like $50 million to ensure that that they can bring Success Academy down here. And if I'm not mistaken, I think, was it him or was it Eva Moskowitz that actually wrote the legislation to try and get it,
Yep.
Get a foothold in our public schools?
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's the thing is this is something no one wants, that has been pushed by Eva Moskowitz, is not from Florida. She did this terrible legislation. This is happening in New York City, and they have a ton of problems with it. And now she has decided, like many people, that they want to move from New York to Florida to retire and wants to get rich off of it, right? So, Lisette, can you tell us a little bit about the resource you created to help parents understand what's happening, the website about this?
Sure. So I did create a website called ourschoolsmiami.com that is basically listing all the information about what's going on with the co-locations, but also all the problems that Success Academy has had in New York City. Just, one of the lawsuits alone that they've been involved in was a discrimination lawsuit where they were discriminating against kids with IEPs, basically disabled kids, that they were trying to push out of their schools, and they ended up having to pay something like $2.4 million to these families because they lost their lawsuit. There was another lawsuit, I think for similar reasons, where they settled quietly, and it was another million some dollars where they had to pay out. But they have a history of aggressiveness towards students. Basically, they're very, how do I explain this? They can have a very authoritarian type feel to them where they're very aggressive towards the students. They have to be very structured. If this child is not structured, they start getting reprimanded. And that's a big problem when you have kids who have ADHD, who might have autism, who might have any kind of issues, any kind of behavioral issues. It just doesn't work. And those are the kids that they're trying to push out from their schools. So it just goes to show that even though charter schools like Success Academy are kind of like public schools because they do take public money, they don't accept all kids into their schools. And that's a very big problem.
I was just looking at the website, and I don't know if you saw my face as I was reading it, but first of all, the website's beautiful. So amazing job on that. But that's probably the only good thing about the website, besides the content is so custodial maintenance. The district must provide custodial maintenance, food, safety, nursing, and transportation services to Success Academy at district taxpayer. What is it like? What? Like, I'm just so mind blown right now. I thought Texas was bad. But I mean, I'm sure I don't want any Texas lawmakers to listen to this because I'm sure it'll give them some ideas. But that's insane. And the fact that they get access to school buildings for renovations, what does that even mean?
They're actually in the school buildings right now renovating because they don't actually start their school until the 27-28 school year. So they're in the high schools right now, getting it already, renovating the space for their schools. Yep.
Yeah. And what's crazy about that is the State Board of Education, right, that made the first rule. Okay, so there is some good news here, right? So the State Board of Education, when they first made this rule, it was basically one empty student station that would be considered an under-enrolled school. So if you had what was considered one empty desk, and this wasn't taking into account our class size amendment, students who needed more space, any of these things, it's just a raw formula that doesn't really reflect what we have asked for, right, as parents, or what is legally required. One empty student station would allow this. And these charter schools could ask for as many schools as they want. We had over 600 requests when this first came out. 1 in 4 schools in Miami-Dade was requested to be co-located, and it was fully at the expense of the public school. So the funds were following the children, but the expenses were not. So this would have actually, even more than it does now, removed opportunity from public school students. Thankfully, through an enormous advocacy effort, phone calls, emails, visits, coordination between school districts and parents and students, it is better. It's not where it needs to be, but and the State Board of Education was in a meeting, was in the Keys. It literally, the only we could have hopped over to Cuba. That's how far south it was. Super not accessible. If you're, tons of barriers to getting there. It's really expensive. It's really far. Even for Lissette, who lives in Miami-Dade. I mean, how long would it have taken you to get to where the meeting was?
It was in Key West proper. It was in Key West, and that's like a 5-hour drive. Because it's one, it's a 2-lane highway basically to get down to Key West. Since it's all islands, it's a long drive, even though it's right there. So it was very hard. I could not attend. I wanted to, but I couldn't.
And then for those of us who went, which by the way, there were only 3 or 4 of us able to go because it was a Friday, and hotel rooms, even the cheapest hotel room was $500. Yeah, exactly. So for a state who loves to claim parental rights, we love to put barriers to parents participating. They only gave us 1 minute to speak, and then they dismissed us saying, I don't know why you're worried. This doesn't take effect until 2027. But as you can hear, in Miami-Dade, they're already renovating schools. So one of the things that I've heard from the school board meetings and things like that is that students in the high schools that are being co-located are actually losing some really important spaces. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
In one of the schools, their special education office was in one of the buildings. They're having to move that. They're losing some science rooms. I think one of the buildings, if I'm not mistaken, was the science wing, and they're taking that. They're losing some very vital rooms that was, their resources. It's literally taking resources away from public education kids. And worst of all is the majority of these schools that are being taken over by Success Academy are in low income neighborhoods. So these are the neediest of the needy kids that their resources are being taken for a charter school that is basically marketed towards higher income families.
And what are the schools and what is the school district doing to alert parents that this is happening, if anything?
Not much, really, unfortunately. I mean, they've had conversations at the school board meeting, but it's everything that's going on as far as trying to warn the families that this is happening and let them know what's going on has been very grassroots. It's been alumni networks within the schools. It's been organizations like Moms for Libros or Power U is another big one that's helping us get the word out that this is happening. The school board is not doing enough, and Success Academy has launched a huge advertising campaign. So where it's like they have billboards up in the neighborhoods letting people know that their Success Academy is coming to their neighborhood. You see them on TV, you hear them on radio. It's huge marketing campaign, and we can't compete with that. They have the money, they have the backing of some of the richest people in the world, and we're trying to do this small little grassroots alumni, people from poor neighborhoods, trying to get the word out that this is what's going on and our resources are being taken from us.
I have a question to take us back a little bit. This is just a small
Sure.
detail that we talked about, but I don't quite still understand. What is the School of Hope? I still don't. Yep.
Yeah, so School of Hope was legislation that was passed, I want to say years run together, but maybe 10 years ago. I know I was there when it passed, but it was in a big it was in a big as these are in a giant train bill that was a committee bill that had, several hundred pages. And so Schools of Hope were created to convert. They were considered high performing charter schools. So it's a list of a certain number of charter schools that are renewed, and the list is maintained by the State Board of Education. And so if we have school grades like most schools across the country, and so if a charter school or a public school is a consistently low performing school, it can be converted to a School of Hope. So they're considered high performers, and they're automatically confirmed to do this. And so what we even saw before this co-location existed is that we'd have school districts that would try to negotiate a contract with these Schools of Hope, and they would be railroaded into whatever this charter school wanted, right? So you would think, oh, this school is low performing. They have to keep the same students. If we're really improving outcomes, we have to keep the same students. They didn't necessarily have to keep the same students. Like, you would see them come before the State Board of Education, and the district would say, look, they're making unreasonable demands. That's the holdup in this contract, right? That was one of them. They wanted them to the school district to pay for buildings, or if the school failed, they wanted to buy it back at their expense, right? The buildings that they had built, or just little things like that. Or that's actually a big thing. That's a lot of money. But the state board would say, I don't know why you're holding this up. Kids are in trouble. And you're like, but this isn't fixing the problem. Like, I know you're making it sound like you're doing something good. And I think that's just consistently the challenge. The reality is if you look at the data in the state of Florida, graduation rates for charter schools perform 15 points below public schools. So these schools aren't doing better. They actually generally get more funding, right? Because they have access to more grants. The federal government expanded. They often close at a higher rate. They don't have the same level of standards as public schools. And so there's this false narrative. And I'm fairly sure that Lissette has on her Success Academy website that they also kick kids out at a really high rate. So if you look at their graduation rate, it doesn't show you the data for kids who, like, for high school example, come and then stay through, because they're kicking so many students out to artificially inflate their graduation rate or artificially inflate their college acceptance rate.
That they do have to go through through testing, just like regular public schools, and they are given a school grade. But if you compare apples to apples, the public school grades versus the charter school grades, they are very similar. And if you consider that their school grades are similar and they can accept these high performing kids And that's all they have in their schools. And they're performing on par where public school kids have all kids that might not be all high performing, and they're performing at the same level. They're obviously not doing that great. You would expect to see them, charter schools, performing at a much higher, level and receiving better grades than the public schools, and they aren't.
Yeah, it's super fun. So we had some success on a state level by rolling back, the bill, or not the bill, the policy isn't as damaging thanks to lots of noise being made. And part of what has been done is very few schools are being co-located. Miami-Dade is a prime target, which was always their goal, right?
Mhm.
What can parents do now to push back? What can we do to assist helping people know what's happening in Miami-Dade? And I know there's going to be there's one school in the works in Broward and just in South Florida in general. How can we help sound the alarm that this is something that they do often? They test market policies in Florida and Texas, Arizona also. How can we stop this both from expanding for the rest of the country, and how can we support this not happening in Miami-Dade? How can we help get the word out?
I think the main thing is just having people speak to each other, just talk to their friends, talk to parents, get involved in things like PTA. They're doing a lot of great things in PTA as far as advocacy for kids go. Um, Talk to as many people as possible about what's going on, because I keep hearing a saying that the Florida of today is the America of tomorrow. And that's very true in so many ways, because a lot of things that have happened, that do happen and have happened in Florida, are now being taken across the nation. It's like we are the testing ground for a lot of these really horrible legislations that, affect our kids and affect our societies, basically affect our communities. Um, we need to get the word out, and we need to let people know that this is what's going on and how it's affecting our kids and our public schools.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is so challenging about living in Florida and doing this work in Florida is that so many people just want to abandon us so quickly.
Yeah,
And I said this actually to Ayaan earlier this week, is that most things worth doing are difficult. They are challenging. They are scary. They are hard, but they're worth doing. And you know, PTA, I came up through PTA. I very much like you was like, oh, there's a challenge in my school. Let me get to work, right? Like,
the
and
sleeves, let's go.
yeah, because that's what you do when something's a challenge and we care about our community as we get involved, right? I can't live in a
Mhm.
bubble because I'm doing okay, or the people around. We have to care deeply about everyone else also. But when at one PTA conference there was a pastors for Florida children often close us, and he said he was talking about the tendency for people to leave difficult states, right, to abandon the work. And I recognize that I'm very fortunate to be able to have the ability to stay. Some people, for their own safety, have to leave, and I'm not negating that, right? Like I get that. But for me, he said, if you leave, who's going to care for these children who you say you love so much? And I sit with that every day, is that, my kids have now graduated, but I want every kid to have at least the opportunities my kids did. And preferably more, because I think we're failing Florida children. The legislature,
Absolutely.
not us, the Florida legislature is failing Florida children. And so how do we care for other kids, other people's kids, just as much as we care for our own, right? If it's not okay for my kid, it shouldn't be okay for your kid. And so I, I'm just I'm just wondering, as we talk about being dangerously optimistic, what gives you hope in this work? What makes you feel hopeful to keep going, to do this work?
I am seeing a change in parents. They seem to be waking up a little bit to what is going on and starting to get a lot more active. So I do have hope that, you know, these parents that are starting to see what's going on will start creating that change we need to help our public schools. Um, and then my kids, my kids keep me going all the time. I do this for them. But I do, I do it for all the kids as well that are going to come up behind them. And, there's something that you said that I want to touch on. It is about our kids, but we need to live in an educated society in order to help our economy grow. If our communities are not educated, our economy is going to just collapse. What we're doing with public education right now is going to hurt us, the state in general, in the long run, and we can't let that happen. I mean, we've already seen instances where companies have decided not to come down to Florida because they don't like the education system and what's going on to the education system in Florida. And right now, as we have some of the highest rates in renting, the cost of living in the state has increased so much that people are actually leaving the state because they can't afford to live in the state. People that might have been born and raised in Florida are now having to move out, especially Miami. Miami has some of the highest rents in the nation right now. Um, Even like myself, I've considered it a little bit because just the cost of living is so incredibly high. I don't know if I wasn't married, I wouldn't be able to afford rent with me and my two kids. And it's we're seeing the exodus that we're seeing and the problem with the low enrollment numbers in our public school. Part of it is because people are fleeing the state because they can't afford to live here anymore. So we have this issue going on right now in the state with the cost of living. And then on top of everything, we're hurting the education system. So companies don't want to come and enter the state and help out with, the issues we're having with the cost of living. So it's affecting everything. This is, what's going on with education affects all facets of our life. And we can't let that happen. So, trying to explain these processes to people is probably the best thing that we can do to help stop the train, to help stop what's going on.
Well, I mean, I feel better knowing that Texas is not alone in our craziness. And Damaris, you and I need to have another episode about what happened at the Texas State Board of Education last week because that was insane.
Yeah.
But again, I feel so good that look, the craziness is everywhere. So, well, Lissette, thank you so much for all you do, and I really appreciate you as a mom taking up this challenge because you saw that your kids were being failed by the state, your kids and the kids of other parents, and you knew what you had to do. And I am so grateful to have you in this fight with us. I hope you can come back and talk to us again, hopefully with some better news very soon. Damaris, anything else to close us out?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much for doing what you're doing. We need all of us to say,
Yeah.
look, we care. And it doesn't have to be a huge commitment. It can be, I'm just going to talk to 5 friends, or I'm just going to talk to 2 friends, or I'm going to have coffee with the people at school. It can be fun. Like this doesn't have to be as difficult as it sounds, right? Like I think about how we got started, like I got started was just having some friends over my house and talking about how we wanted to make things better, right? They have a clear plan to make things bad. We need just, if not more, of a clear plan of how to make things better. And you can
Yeah.
do that by building community, which we all desperately need. And so
Yeah.
thank you for the work you're doing, for stepping up. And I hope that it is an inspiration for more parents and more students, because that's the other thing that we didn't mention.
Yeah.
There is a huge group of students that are working in this, that are in this fight, that are fighting for their schools. And that to me is just, I'm a big fan of students doing the work, but that to me is so exciting because they aren't just, people say that students are our future, but they are also our present. And so as they are getting involved and doing this work, that is exciting to me because that says that the next generation or this upcoming generation cares deeply about their communities and cares deeply about their schools, and they're willing to do the work to make sure that they have the future that they deserve. And so we should stand with them in this fight as parents and as community members. So thank you for what you're doing. And I think we have good news. The part of this that is good is that people care and are doing
Yeah.
good work, and we just have to grow it. So thank you for, do you have anything you want to share that you didn't get to say?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for having me on, and thank you for helping me, spread the news of what's going on in Miami. Hopefully we can get this message out. And we can get more people to step up and fight for our public schools. It doesn't take much. It really,
No.
a letter writing campaign, just talking to your legislators, talking to your school board members, talking to your friends, talking to whoever. That's all it takes, you know?
And
So
there is
thank you.
joy in resistance and joy in community every time that, we go out in Texas and go to the State Board of Education. We bring, 50 people together and we're there for 18 hours, but we
Yes.
order pizza, we order dessert, we order brownies, and we're just sitting there and, we're getting attacked racially, we're getting attacked with xenophobic comments. But at the end of the day, we're together. And one thing that I've noticed is a lot of times we're outnumbered because they pay people from out of state and out of city to come and be there. But at the end of the day, we have more experience and more passion with this because we are connected with it. And so we're going to bring that lived experience and that passion to everything we do because we truly care. So thank you both. And to our listeners, thank you so much for being with us. I look forward to our next episode very soon of Dangerously Optimistic, Lessons in Protecting Public Education in the South and across the country. And we look forward to seeing you all very soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.